Science and art are like so innately human. Science being this curiosity of, you see something shiny and you're like, what is that? And then art is just, I feel something, I want to express it, right? Those are so innately human and ingrained within us. For us to try to separate the two is like trying to split a human in half.
Science has a communication problem. The research is extraordinary, but the way we share it too often leaves people on the outside looking in. Today's guest has made it his life's work to change that. Jeffrey Tao is a PhD trained scientist who spent years in the lab developing DNA nanomachines for the targeted delivery of cancer therapeutics. Today, he draws the front covers of science journals because the art in him just couldn't stay quiet. This is a conversation about storytelling, identity, and what science looks like when it remembers it was made by people. I'm your host, Nissia John. You're watching Artside Currents, and let's dive in with Jeff. I really am so grateful to have you on this podcast and just to have you share about your work. I saw you on Instagram. A couple posts I think came up on the Career Art Foundation's feed, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, who is this person creating visual art and doing illustrations, but also very passionate about being in the lab?" Can you share about your work and what you're doing?
Yes, it's an interesting niche that I found myself in. I never thought I would be here, honestly. You asked me, like, when I started my PhD, I had no idea this place existed. So, what I essentially do is I illustrate for journal covers of the science journals that you see out there, maybe even the ones you might be reading. Professors or PIs, they have this opportunity when they submit their manuscript, they can also submit a supplementary cover art. So they can hire an artist or get someone from the lab to submit this piece of art so that they have a chance. It's competitive to get their art and their research work featured on the front covers of journals. And so it's incredible that they provide this opportunity for artists, especially in the science world, to express their artistic side and express science through an artistic lens. And so that I'm very grateful for these journals. I just started doing this in my PhD, and it was for my supervisor, and he just knew that I loved art. I started drawing for him in his research. Yeah, now I'm meeting with people all over the world, from Germany to Japan to the States, people in the most sophisticated institutions and laboratories who are publishing in wonderful journals, and I get to meet them face to face and illustrate their research for them to submit to these journal covers. And I can't believe that I blended my passion for the arts and science into this niche.
It's honestly incredible. It's so rare to see people actually pursue this and actually see the fruit of their work and their interests come together in such an interesting way. But I want to know how your supervisor even knew in the first place that you were doing art. Like, were you like scribbling on desks? Like, how did they know?
Yeah, so several of my lab mates were part of student groups, and I would just kind of design or illustrate fun things for them to feature on their flyers or their event pages. And so they caught wind and started following my personal Instagram page and saw that I just loved doing art. And so when this opportunity came by, I don't know exactly who said it, but they just slipped a note to my supervisor, and that's where he came up to me and said, "I heard you're an artist, and there's an interesting opportunity here." So that was third year PhD. Yeah.
Well, I think it's even so cool that your supervisor came up to you with that opportunity. I feel like so many supervisors might be sometimes against going into artistic fields or artistic endeavors. And we'll talk about this a little bit later too. But was there a moment when this started to build traction for you that you felt like this was a possibility while you were in your PhD studies? What was that like?
It's funny, my co-supervisor said one day, "Wow, you're actually scoring quite a bit of these journal covers." So it wasn't, just subject to chance. There was actually something about my art. More often than not, they were being published as front covers or inside front covers or back covers. So that's where I was like, "Whoa, this is certainly a place where there's some interest, there's some demand. I wonder if there's any way to monetize this. And that's where I was actually introduced to a lady from Europe. I forget her name, Ella Morrow Design. She does 3D illustration. And she's actually started her own studio where she doesn't just do journal covers, but she does scientific figures, illustrations for different companies or museums, etc. All the different scientific kind of illustrations across the board. And that's where I really saw a path. And I thought, okay, someone's done this.
Yeah.
I haven't seen really anyone else, but if I see one person that's done this, then I know it's possible. So that's where I really just set my eyes on this goal. Because, since I was a young kid, as early as I can remember, I just loved art. And so after this PhD, if there is an opportunity for me to have a career in art, but also not waste my PhD or give up all the science that I studied and really toiled away in the lab for, then that would be the perfect blend. And then I just kept submitting journal cover after journal cover, started with, just offering them for free. My supervisor even offered to pay me. I was like, no, I'm trying to build a portfolio here. Let me just take this opportunity. I don't want us to have a professional relationship just yet. So I did about like 12, 15 covers for them. Once I graduated, they gave me a nice check after because they were so appreciative.
Oh, that's so nice. I actually want to go back a moment to when you talked about being a kid and being so interested in art. Because if you were so interested in art, what then made you go into a more scientific route and not choose art in the first place?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because I was never actually presented that question growing up. What do you want to do? I was always kind of told this is what you should do. And growing up, especially, and I know other Asians can resonate with this and beyond Asians too, but my parents were immigrants. And so they only knew survival through success, right? And success being, a stable career, one that pays you well, one that society really relies on you for. And that looks like a lawyer, doctor, engineer, right? And so med school was kind of the big overall arching goal. And I saw how much my parents sacrificed for me. So I just really wanted to provide for them too and kind of give back. And I thought medicine would have been perfect. But it's funny because this whole time, like I would always be painting too. And always kind of thought it was this hobby or side project, but it just kind of keep erupting out of me. It started with actually my auntie, one of my close friends' mothers, who ran an art class for kids. It started there, and I just fell in love with art there, and I just couldn't stop drawing and painting. Growing up, I think that just kept kind of getting pushed down as responsibilities as you grow older come into play. And so by the time I got into high school, that was like, okay, Jeff, you got to stop. Put down the pencil, it's time to really get competitive for these universities. But I just kept sneaking off to draw because I just loved it so much. In university, it was pushed down way hard. I actually had to go into the basement of my parents' house to kind of take out my art supplies, and I would draw till like 4 in the morning sometimes, which isn't ideal for a student because you got classes and assignments. But like, I don't know, it's just something that I felt so intoxicated by.
Wow.
And I just felt like it just expressed something within me that I couldn't formulate in words or couldn't living in my immigrant household, like emotions weren't ever processed. We would never speak out about anything because it might seem like you're ungrateful or you're talking back to your parents or something. And so art was kind of my medium for that emotional expression. Once I got into my PhD, that's where I really started following some art accounts. It was actually COVID-19 where, we had to step away from the lab where I was like, oh, wow, there's a whole art world out there of people making it. Like, I really could have gone to art school and made it, know? And so I took that year where we were forced away from the lab to just like study art. So I just took online courses and pretty much taught myself through these courses online, specifically through digital illustration. And that's where I was like, wow, I feel like that child is like coming back up. They're so excited about every day again. My PhD was getting rough. And this is where I was really like, okay, if I actually end up not being able to complete my PhD, I could just quit and go to art and that would be okay, right? So luckily, started having success, published some papers, and so after on the other side, discovered this whole journal cover illustrations. Like, okay, let's just dive both feet in. Let's see where this goes. If someone else could do it, I can do it. And here we are. So
I really, really like that. I like also you said that it was almost erupting out of you, that it's almost like the art couldn't stay contained in. I think that's something that we're trying to allow to be present in a lot of the art set community spaces we're creating online, is because people have to often suppress this art that they may have grown up doing, or at a certain critical period, they often have to make a choice of, I should go in this direction and that direction over pursuing the art only. But it seemed like as soon as you had the space and the environment and the permission to even create in your lab, then it was like, oh, wait, I can actually do something with this. Are there any other things that you've seen or you think that limits people's ability to pursue both art and science?
yeah, for sure. I think traditionally, and in a lot of conversations I've had throughout my university years, art and science have always been discussed as both ends of a spectrum or extremes of a spectrum where the middle never really gets discussed at all. Where one feels empirical, that's a science is empirical, experimental, factual, literal, and then art feels subjective, up in the air. It's emotional. It's depending on who you are, right? That's, I think, where the two sides clash a little. And I think because of that, in academia, we create that culture, right? Faculty of arts, faculty of science, and then both kind of look over the fence and go, "Oh, I'll never understand that," or "That's weird to me,"
We're
or
not one of them. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like, if we're talking about neuroscience, the brain, the left and the right, one's more analytical, one's more creative. Like, is there this corpus callosum, this middle part that just synergizes the two where people can look at the other side and go, that's interesting. I'm just going to try it out and see what comes of it. And I think that's always been the human endeavor. Even if you look at the greatest scientific discoveries, they're all driven by this human emotion, this human drive to not just like understand the world, but because there's an excitement that comes out of research. It's a creative endeavor itself. You have to really think broadly, think creatively, think about different problems from different perspectives. And so why not do that with the arts, right? And I think that's where you can really find some interesting paths forward, like yourself. I mean, we were talking about your PhD research question and yeah, the interdisciplinary field of where science and art can kind of walk together forward into the future. I think that's largely played this clash between the two sides. I think it is just an academic kind of culture. It's systemic the way these two fields have been segregated and not, extended the hand across the fence. Maybe it's things like Cree art and people like us that are human scientists and therefore science artists. But science and art are like so innately human, science being this curiosity of like you see something shiny and you're like, what is that? And then art is just this I feel something, I want to express it, right?
I completely agree. I love your analogy of the corpus callosum because I feel like the art scientist mentality or the way of thinking, it's not really about the art and the science. It's just about the way of bringing ideas together. Really, there is something there about knowledge and learning and growing and just pursuing how the world works. That's so fundamentally human. That's just who we are. I feel like everyone has an art in them to some extent. And I guess the way the world works currently, and it wasn't always like that, but the world works currently is that we often have to separate this way of seeing knowledge in the art and the science. Like in your example, when you see something shiny, it's like, oh, how is that like that? And why is it like that? But the same question can come from art. How is it like that? And why is it like that? Can I recreate that color? Can I recreate the way that it shines in an artistic way? So really, a lot of the questions are so similar at the root. It's just that they have different approaches kind of to get from one point to the end. There's just so much there. Interdisciplinary ideas are exciting to imagine, but surprisingly hard to build. Not because the idea isn't good, but because without a clear structure, even the most compelling concepts can delay. The Art Science in Motion framework is a digital workbook with that structure. 5 guided modules will take you from a scattered idea to a defined, testable proof of concept. Our easy to follow worksheets will help you name what you're doing, understand why it matters, and give you a roadmap for all that comes next. Download your copy at creart.ca/store. In our first meet, we talked about the pursuit of knowledge. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So this pursuit of knowledge is actually rooted from I believe it's Greek origins of the PhD, which is an abbreviation for Doctor of Philosophy, which is translated from Doctor Philosophiae. And Doctor Philosophiae is a definition as teacher of the love of wisdom. See, I didn't know any of this going into my PhD, during my PhD, or even after my PhD. It was like, just this past year that I've really looked into it, and I've been just completely amazed by this definition. And thinking back to when the term was coined, like the thought of these scholars that they were putting into this term, they're doing this research, and it's the Enlightenment period where they're kind of allowing thoughts to be more free and away from government control. Universities are being established, and they're thinking, well, here's now a program where we can freely think. What should we call this? This program, you are training to be a teacher of the love of wisdom. Like, I wonder what that circle was like in the past? And that's the essence I think we've lost. This so love being a pursuit, right? You're obsessed, you're infatuated. And wisdom being not just knowledge, but everything around that piece of knowledge too, right? The depth and breadth of that knowledge. And so when you're pursuing that knowledge, that means you're pursuing a deep understanding of something. And so in deeply understanding something, you're continually understanding how it operates in the modern world, the novelties of it, how it changes over time, right? And that's where research really comes in, how it can be combined with something to innovate something new. You're discovering new things in a specific field, right? These are all pursuits of knowledge, and it's described using the word love. I think, unfortunately, that's where a lot of this original definition has been lost today, where I was encouraged to join my PhD to get the degree so that I have a successful career, so that I could be either a professor or a medical doctor without thinking about what actually research meant. I was never asked, "Do you like research?" Is crazy that I was never asked that. Maybe I'm like an outlier, but I was just so, I think because of my childhood too, just so pressured to be successful and saw the doctorate as kind of the highest degree awarded by the institution. Therefore, that's what I had to aim
Right.
for, and didn't realize what research was, and what I was entering was this pursuit of knowledge, to fall in love with understanding things more deeply and setting up methodology to answer questions that no one's found answers to, asking new questions that no one's ever asked before. It's always felt like this means to an end rather than an enjoyable process itself that kind of transforms you. It's a transformative journey, absolutely, that changes you into a lover of wisdom.
I feel like that also completely changes your approach and the way that you do the research. You're just approaching it from a completely different mindset of what's possible and where the question can go. I know you work a lot with other students who are exploring research and you do a lot of content creation on informing incoming researchers on what the research world is like. Is this something you try to share with them as well, that you can actually love the knowledge?
This whole content creation journey actually started in the lab when I was a senior researcher, and I was just sharing these insights to my junior lab mates. A lot of them coming to me, literally crying on my shoulder, just like I'm rubbing their backs because they're full blown panic attack. There's a lot of suffering that I felt like was so needless and unfortunate, kind of stem from a lack of mentorship, a lack of this, what I was discovering to be enjoyable. My favorite researcher. His name is Dr. Feynman. He's a Nobel Prize winner, and I just watched one of his interviews, and it's brilliant. Someone asked him, "What do you think of the Nobel Prize?" And you'd think people would say, "Ah, what an honor! I'm so glad people saw my research." And he's like, what is the Nobel Prize? Like, I don't do this stuff for honors. I don't do this stuff. I do it for the kick of discovery. He talked about a phase where he just lost the joy of research, and he was disgusted at physics, he said, until he started playing around with research questions. He saw someone spinning plates, and that's where he was like, whoa, that's interesting, and he applied what he observed to physics questions, and that's what got him the Nobel Prize, right? So I just feel like that's so rare now, this perspective, and that's what I'm really trying to share with my content. Research is not just something you do in your PhD, it's something you take into everyday life.
I'm actually so touched because I think this is something that really drives the motive behind the foundation. Are some of these stories of how out of place people sometimes feel, or how pressured, or how much they aren't able to enjoy the process of what they're trying to pursue. I just feel like everyone has a purpose. And if you're trying to do something with a curiosity behind it, but you're not able to create it, to go after that thing with your full identity, like with all the parts of yourself, it just breaks my heart.
Like, all it took was just to sit down and listen to you, your story, what you're going through, what are the problems you're encountering in your research, what's your thought process of the different directions you're taking, and for me to go, maybe you should try this, or I would suggest this. It sounds like this might not be the most efficient way. In my experience, blah, 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 and then they go, light bulb moment, and go, oh my gosh.
Just to be able to see someone's life change, even if it doesn't lead to something that, it's really crazy, and maybe it's not the Nobel Prize, but just to allow someone to feel like they have clarity to go forward with something that they care about. I just feel like that's so, so important. There's so many people who need to be encouraged and just be supported. That's another thing that I hope that this foundation gets to do. It's really to encourage and push people forward. Like, it's not really to be like, oh, let's take over and let's be the art side giants of the world. No, like there's so many people who are doing great things around the globe. People have been doing this for years. And there's just a thing about listening and saying, yeah, you can do it. You can go through this thing, that people are like, oh, I can actually go. I really love that you touched on that. But I also want to get back to your own experience in the visual illustration, the digital illustration, and your first piece of work in journal cover art, and how you felt in that moment and what that process was like for you.
I thought maybe I would share this actually. So this is the first cover illustration that I ever did. It was for chemical communications, and my lab mate just developed this new methodology, and the acronym was BEAR, BEAR. So I have a bear here conducting this research. I have its scheme kind of in that bubble. My lab mate was a bird keeper, so she had a pet bird, so I just kind of put that in there for her just as a little, Easter egg just for her. But yeah, that was my first one, and I kinda did it and thought, "Oh, this is kind of fun. I'm not sure if I'll get it." Like, this is just a fun little project for me to kinda escape from my research a little bit and get on the drawing pad and create something. But then it got the inside front cover, and I was like, "What?" Like, that's crazy. Like, this? At this point, I actually didn't take those courses during COVID. I didn't elevate my art yet to where it is now. And so this I find very amateur. And I thought at that point, oh, my art's not really where I want it to be. But if my supervisor is asking, let's just give it a shot. This moment, this is 2019, so this must have been just before COVID, actually. This was the first moment where I thought, whoa, if this is published, if this kind of level of art is published, all I need to do is work more on my craft of art, of illustration, and I will get more publications, right? That just seems logical to me. So let's just really dive deep into learning how to do art better. And that was true. Now I have a lot of different commissions, right? I've lost count how many. But yeah, it all started with this one, this little Baron lab coat.
You said last time that you almost have to say no sometimes to certain commissions because you just don't have the time. There's just like a lot coming in. I didn't know that this market was available, that there was something out here for this. How did you discover there were so many opportunities?
It was actually American Chemical Society, big publisher. that contacted me and said, "Hey, we're running these DEI covers trying to increase representation in the sciences. Could you help illustrate for those?" And so that was kind of my big foot in the door, my big into this space. I got connected with managing editors. I did a series of illustrations for them. There was, for example, Dr. Carl Buch, who was a chemistry professor who had a football accident. And so he's been living in a wheelchair since and got his PhD in his wheelchair. And so that was a cool illustration I did. There's an indigenous scientist who is first of her generation who struggled with being part of the institution that her culture so often despised or was traumatized by, right, because of the past. So interesting stories there that I helped to pick. So it's been a very meaningful journey, and it really did start with just this bear.
We talk a bit about meaning and storytelling and how people feel from the kind of work that you do. Do you think that there's a reaction that you get, even if it's on a journal cover? Is there a reaction that people might get from the kinds of work that you produce?
Yeah, I think the first reaction I noticed is awe. They behold the art, but the research and the complexity of that research within that art. And that altogether just makes people kind of go like, wow. And they might not even know what they're saying wow about, but there's something very admirable and impressive about what's being presented here, both visually but also just conceptually. But then some just go, "Oh, cool." Not everyone connects. But for those that do say, "Wow," they take the next step and go, "Okay, what's the story here? Like, what is the research here?" They get more interested, and that's where I find this actually does invite broader audiences to just inquire more. That's the bridge that's now been built between the science and the reader, where they just become curious now about the science. If you've just kept it in a paper, if you've kept it in a graphical abstract, even with all this jargon and these technical terms, no one turns their eye, no one turns their head because they don't understand it. But now you have something presented in a way that resonates with them. You really invite windows into this room of research for people to just come and be curious about. Why jargon, technical terms don't work is because people don't like to feel dumb, right? People don't want to be like, I'm not even going to try because I'm unknowing of this field and I don't want to pretend, right? If you help bridge that understanding for people, you it not only empower them, but you actually draw them closer to science and make them feel good about understanding science, right? And it just took a little bit of perspective shift, a little bit of analogy, a little bit of,
Play, like you said earlier, which I love that word because Bruno and I went off about play in our own conversation. We were talking about things. And I like that you said it again earlier because it's exactly that. It's like, okay, how can the bear be a part of this? And it's just playing around with the different elements of
yes.
each thing so that a different story can unfold. Quick question. Have you ever felt like the only person in the room who cares about the logic and the creativity, the experiment and the exhibition, the data set and the performance? Well, you're not alone, you just haven't found your people yet. The CREMAP Directory of Innovators and Art Scientists is the CREART Foundation's global directory of multidisciplinary minds, a searchable, growing community of practitioners who live exactly at that intersection. Create your free profile, get discovered, and find collaborators who actually speak your interdisciplinary language. To learn more, head to creart.ca/cremap. That's creart.ca/CREMAP and join the network. What is that storytelling like in terms of balancing the art and the science? Because you still have to some extent, convey the science in the work, yet you're not putting the science in an artistic form. It's really like a conversation. How do you approach that storytelling between the two?
For now, it depends on my client. Sometimes it's just the literal art they want to just have express their research, right? And just a kind of visually nice way. And that's fine. That's a cool way to appreciate science too, right? If you can't see the molecule, well now you can, right? And this is as if we just taken like a nanoscope and just really looked at things, right? Or a picoscope, if there's such thing, to really investigate these molecules. And now you have a little insider view. So that's kind of a literal is okay too, accurate is okay too. But I think the storytelling element of research really boils down to why are you doing this research, right? So this is your what, then so what? How does this connect with humanity? Why are we paying tax dollars for this, right? And that's what people connect with, right? There's so many technologies that are advancing so fast, but if they don't do anything or actually meet the consumer, meet the patient, and change things, then it's like, okay, then who cares, right? So through storytelling, I always try to figure out how to show the application of what this research is about. Is that a patient? Is that, for example, actually, journal cover I just did that got accepted as the front cover of Environment and Health depicted the rural communities in Bangladesh because they struggle with their groundwater contaminated with inorganic arsenic, which is toxic, which causes cancer, skin lesions. So I drew these Bangladesh rural communities, a woman kind of pumping water out a well, a child drinking that. And I drew the chemicals that were kind of being transformed in their through their liver and all these metabolites that were causing all these diseases. Like those are the stories, right? We're not just here investigating how arsenic is metabolized in a human body. We're doing this because it's been a serious problem in one part of the world that has increased rates of cancer and skin lesions. Now it's become a global problem of arsenic in water, and that's the story here, and that's what people care about. So if you want people to care about your research, they have to care about the story and why you're doing it.
Right, I think that's so important because how can you really understand or resonate with something if it's not relatable or they're not able to connect to it? We talked about in our last conversation that scientists sometimes don't value the art in the exact same way that someone in the general public might. Is there a way, do you think, that we can use the same element of storytelling, even though the science is already in the art, in the visual art? What is a way for people who are more scientifically minded, how can we perhaps share that storytelling side so that they can also feel like, "Oh, yeah, this is important too."
That's tough, right? Because everyone kinda gets into science for different reasons. You can just be a super hard worker and be successful with experimentations, right? You can be the person that just grinds and doesn't really care about, like, why. You just know the cure to cancer is important for humanity, and you're gonna make millions off of your discovery, right? And not really care about and that's completely fine, right? Like, I'm not here to change people in the way they think, right? I'm not because I think that would just stress me out. I don't like to be abrasive with people, but I do want to invite those who do give it a chance to kind of take on a new perspective or see what this perspective is all about of storytelling. And if my mission could be boiled down to one sentence, it would be to reconnect researchers with their work. And I do that through my art, I do that through my studies content, and storytelling is how it's been done for ages through communities, through the history of humanity. It still has a part to play today. When we stop telling stories, actually, that's where we start losing sense of what we're doing. That's where we start losing as a society the importance of science. I was just on a video call with Chloe the scientist. I'm not sure if you know her. She's a science communicator on Instagram. She's got 100,000 followers and she does a great job telling science, but she was talking about how she was reading in a book where science was like mainstream. It would always hit the news headlines, front cover of these news articles. And these scientists would actually come out into public squares and teach in like just this community square. And people could come and just listen, ask questions, and just learn about science, right? But now it feels like these communities or at least science discussions and I don't know, there's been a retreat, I think. And maybe that's not a science thing specifically. I think we're doing that just as the world culturally right now. Everyone's kind of retreating into their own tribes and villainizing everyone elsewhere in their own tribes. But going back to storytelling, I think that's what really connects us all, right?
What I like that you said is that you're really allowing people who are curious to even go in that direction the space to do so. So, is there a way for you to do the dance and the science? Is there a way for you to do the biology and the illustration? Like, how can you create that space for people to begin to tell those stories? And I think that's something that's really resonant in the work that we're trying to get out of the art sci intersection. I'd love to know what you think about the future of the work that you're doing. Do you think there is a change that can come from the impact that you're having on the community you have?
Yeah, I think like the mission just keeps getting bigger the more I think about it and the more I work on this. I never imagined to be almost 30K followers at this point. It's only almost 4 months. And I'm like, whoa, what I'm trying to do, how far is it going to go? I'm already contacting people from Germany, Europe, the States, Asia, Australia, India, students from all over the like, is this really an international mission that I'm on where we're literally changing the world from the bottom up? I keep saying that. It feels buzzy. It feels kind of like a, like a fever dream, you know? But like, is this actually happening right now? And that's where I'm like, wow, how far is this gonna go? Honestly, social media, this mission I'm on, wow, this is big. Like,
I mean, I think it's gonna get big. Like I'm just so inspired by the posts that I get to see sometimes. I think there's so many people on there who are commenting and actually have stories that they feel like this is something that's going to change them. Mentioned AI briefly in our discussion, but that's another thing that's coming up in research and in science and the world of art as well. What is that like for you in terms of your AI experience in illustration and integrity with the work that you're trying to produce?
there's a question I read, what is the role of AI in illustration? And I think its role is as an antagonist to the story of artists who are the protagonists, try to keep humanity in everything that we do. It's so funny because I remember being in a conversation with a professor at a conference where I was featuring my the cover art from my research alongside the poster, and he was like, "That's so interesting. Like, you don't think that's redundant?" And I was like, "Oh, the cover art?" He was like, "AI could just make that." I was like, "I actually really enjoyed drawing this." I think people don't resonate with AI. I think people still would like art to be created by humans. And he's like, "Well, in science, I disagree because science is all about progress and productivity and publishing new things. So if AI can make that quicker, even through art, wouldn't that just be beneficial for humanity?" And I was like, interesting. Like maybe there's a case where you're more productive. I don't know. But ultimately, I think you would lose the storytelling, you would lose the human aspects, and you'd start to forget why you're doing this research.
I think even in the way that AI produces art, it almost erases the story in itself because people, we have stories, we have emotions, we have experiences, and that gets translated into how we create the art and the errors that we supposedly see on the paper or in the way that the story is communicated is coming from a story of ourselves. And so I guess coming from the AI is that, wait a minute, where is the humanity in this? Where is the experience? Where is the love? Where is what makes the story real. And I think that's probably where the disconnect is coming from. I'm seeing a really interesting through line in just the way that you're thinking about things with the lover of wisdom and humanity and storytelling. You're really getting back to this root of sense of who you are and sense of what you really are driven to do. Do you have any final words of thoughts or advice for just encouraging people to really tap into that human storytelling, taking experiences together, a kind of point of view, and putting that into their work, whether it's research, visual art, or a combination of the two?
Yes, I think to anyone listening, like now more than ever, I think in human history, because of the internet, because of social media, opportunity is everywhere. Honestly, like I never had this opportunity to get connected with people across the globe to be my clients, right? I'm meeting with grad students and top researchers for journal covers from across the world because I found this need, this very human need. I think the more that we connect with our human side and bring that out into our workplace, the more traction, the more attention that you're going to get. And if you create a career out of that, I think that's where you're going to really pave the way forward. You're going to really create spaces that people want to fill. That, like for example, I just started creating content, right? Well, 28,000 now on my page, right? Like all I did was have a message of reconnecting people to their work. And people are hungry for that. People want to know like why they're doing this, why they're pipetting, why they're spending all these hours in the lab. And people want to know how to add more meaning and more balance to their work, right? So I think if people actually really connect with themselves and with their work and bring that out in a way that solves that disconnect, I think you have a lot of opportunity in this world as an artist, as a scientist. If you're both, as a science artist, like you have immense opportunity.
Jeff said something earlier almost in passing, that art kept erupting out of him no matter how hard he pushed it down. That image stuck with me because I think a lot of people listening know exactly what that feels like. There's a part of yourself that doesn't fit the track you're on, but it keeps resurfacing anyway. What Jeff did was find the place where that eruption became the work itself. And in doing so, he didn't just build a career, he built something that actually serves the scientific community, giving researchers a way to be seen and giving the rest of us a way in. His message at the end of our conversation was simple. Opportunity is everywhere for people who are willing to bring their full human self to what they do, as an artist, as a scientist, and especially as both. Links to Jeff's work, his journal cover portfolio, and his content are all in the show notes. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone in a lab, a studio, or anywhere in between who needs to hear it. There we have it, another intersection in motion. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Art Sidecards, where conversations between disciplines become new ways of thinking, creating, and connecting. If you've ever felt pulled between disciplines, this space is for you, and I hope this conversation inspires you to see what's possible in your own journey. This episode was proudly produced by the CreArt Foundation for Art Science Innovation. I'm your host and founder, Missia John, and these conversations were made possible by the volunteer support of Broom Bettler, our lead project assistant, audio editing by Andrea Gutierrez, and video content formatting by Numina Ramarari. Explore more episodes and interdisciplinary projects at creart.ca. See you in the next episode, and stay curious, stay interdisciplinary. Let's keep the art science currents in motion.